running underground from refineries on the Gulf Coast, all the way up the eastern seaboard. 2.5 million barrels of fuel every day, 45% of all the gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel on the East Coast, flows through Colonial. If Colonial stops, half the country starts running on fumes. On the morning of May 7, 2021, Colonial stopped. No equipment failure, no accident, no storm. Someone had broken in with a password they bought on the dark web. Here's what makes this attack so terrifying. The hackers never touched the pipeline software. They never broke into the industrial control systems. They didn't even need to. So why did the pipeline shut down? The answer changed how every critical infrastructure company in America thinks about cybersecurity. The group behind the attack called themselves DarkSide, a Russian-speaking ransomware operation that had been active for about a year. Their business model wasn't to steal money directly. They sold their ransomware to affiliates, other criminals who would do the actual breaking in. The affiliate who broke into Colonial Pipeline didn't have to do much breaking in at all. They simply logged in. The password they used belonged to a Colonial employee, or rather, a former employee. The account had been deactivated for hiring purposes, but the credentials were still valid for the company's VPN. And the VPN account had no multi-factor authentication. The password itself had been leaked years earlier as part of an unrelated data breach and was sitting in a credential dump on the dark web. It cost the attacker less than $100 to walk through Colonial Pipeline's front door. Once inside Colonial's network, DarkSide moved fast. Within hours, they had compromised the company's billing system, the system Colonial uses to track how much fuel goes through the pipeline and bill their customers. Then, on the morning of May 7th, they deployed the ransomware. Files across Colonial's IT network started getting encrypted. A ransom note appeared on screens, demanding payment in Bitcoin. But here's the part that makes no sense at first. The ransomware never actually touched the operational technology, the systems that physically control the pipeline. The pipeline itself could have kept running. Colonial chose to shut it down anyway, because without the billing system, they couldn't track how much fuel was being delivered. They couldn't bill customers. They couldn't operate the business side, even though the engineering side was technically fine. And the panic was about to make everything so much worse. News of the Colonial shutdown spread within hours. By that afternoon, gas stations from Atlanta to Charlotte were reporting unusual traffic. By the next morning, the lines were a mile long. Panic buying took over. People drove from one station to the next looking for fuel. Some filled plastic bags with gasoline. A few of them caught fire. And then it stopped being a local problem. Within 72 hours, 70% of gas stations in Atlanta were dry, 85% in Charlotte, half of all stations in Virginia. Airlines started rerouting flights. Trucking companies couldn't refuel their fleets. The governors of Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and Virginia declared states of emergency. President Biden declared a national emergency. All because a billing database had ransomware on it. And while America was running out of gas, Colonial Pipeline was making a decision that the FBI specifically advised against. Within hours of the attack, DarkSide's ransom demand arrived. 75 Bitcoin. At the time, about $4.4 million. The FBI's standard guidance to ransomware victims is the same as it's always been. Do not pay. Paying funds future attacks. It rewards the criminals. Colonial Pipeline paid the ransom anyway, within hours of the demand. The CEO later testified to Congress that he made the call because he didn't know how long the outage would last, and the country couldn't afford an extended shutdown. But what they got for their $4.4 million is the part that really stings. DarkSide sent over a decryption tool. Colonial used it, and then immediately discovered the decryption tool was so slow that restoring from backups would be faster. They had paid $4.4 million for software that was effectively useless. What happened next set a precedent that ransomware operators around the world would never forget. In June 2021, just 5 weeks after the attack, the United States Department of Justice announced something unprecedented. They had recovered 63.7 Bitcoin from a wallet they had identified as DarkSide's, roughly $2.3 million, more than half of Colonial's ransom payment. They had done it by following the Bitcoin transaction trail across the public blockchain, a blockchain that ransomware groups had long believed was anonymous. It was not. But the person who actually pulled this off, they're still out there. DarkSide had already announced it was going dark, servers offline, communications cut. Some security researchers believe the Russian government quietly pressured them to disband after the attack on American critical infrastructure drew too much attention. The affiliate who actually compromised Colonial, the person who used the stolen password, has never been publicly identified. So here's what the Colonial Pipeline hack should teach every company in America. The part most coverage gets wrong. Colonial Pipeline's defenses weren't bad. They had firewalls, they had intrusion detection, they had a security operations team. What they didn't have was multi-factor authentication on a single dormant account. One forgotten VPN, one unused login, one missing layer of security on a credential that should have been deleted months earlier. This is the part that ought to keep every CISO in America awake at night. It wasn't a sophisticated attack. It wasn't a zero-day. It wasn't insider espionage. It was the second most basic security failure imaginable. A forgotten account without MFA, compromised by a password that any teenager with $20 could have bought. The next critical infrastructure attack isn't coming from a state-sponsored hacking team. It's coming from someone who bought a leaked password and got lucky. What's the dormant account in your organization that nobody remembers? Drop it in the comments. And next Tuesday, we're heading to Florida, where a 17-year-old took over the Twitter accounts of Barack Obama, Elon Musk, and Bill Gates on the same afternoon. See you then.